Welcome back to the OC Chat Bar podcast with your favorite barista and bartender here. We're here to inform, educate, and advise our bar patrons, that is you, with a mix of fun and humor, to pour up your own libations, be it coffee, tea, water, or something stronger. We are your hosts. My name is Celeste. Not
And my name is Otasha.
So just starting off, our house rules. If you're coming back, you already know how it is. No phobias, the phobia-free space. Respond with grace and behave and interact respectfully, whether you disagree with what we're talking about or not. And going into the disclaimers, both Otasha and I, we're not licensed therapists, we're not journalists or counselors, and we hope that our conversations are a startup point for your consideration. If you need professional support, please seek that. All right, and we're going to start off with our first segment, our espresso shots, our introduction to be able to start our conversations for the day that just gives us a burst of energy. So, Otasha, our first espresso shot.
All right.
Just a reflective question. What are your first thoughts on this? So, what's something in life that you wish came with a warning label? And given the opportunity to warn your younger self about it, what tangible thing would you give yourself that would help you with this thing?
What I wish came with, I wish student loans came with better warning labels. Yeah. Like because like you it's sold to you as like a thing to get to your future, to progress in life. But really, I feel like the downfall of it wasn't like really explained, like the interest rate, how that grows, the different plans that are available to you, grants more as an alternative compared to the loan. So I wish there was more information or more of a warning label when it came to student loans back then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then what's like a tangible thing that you'd give yourself that be able to help you with this thing?
I don't know. Maybe check out grants more than I did the student loans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because them bad boys, they're sitting on my back.
I guess, or like a stack of cash or something.
Yeah.
Something from a loan shark or something.
Oh God, that's even worse. That's even worse.
No, I get you. I would, it'd be nice to have like, okay, this sounds weird, but okay, a chessboard. I would want like the tangible that I would need to be able to help me like prepare for like things that were unexpected, right? I think a lot of the times in my life, the warning label was just about like, my warning label would be more so towards like just strategic relationships and relationship building, especially in like work and professional spaces.
It's like networking and stuff.
Yes. Or especially when you start to move up with like very influential people. There's like certain strategic moves that you have to have in play. And I wish that I had like a warning label about that. So I was really naive about certain things in my earlier career. So probably a chessboard, because it just teaches you strategy and like forces you to think about how to like move forward, like 10 steps ahead.
Okay.
That would be really cool. But okay, our next espresso shot. The question is, you woke up tomorrow, felt like it was a better place to live. What was the smallest thing that happened to make that so?
The education of men or boys. I think that's a big gap that we're missing. The education, the true education of young boys and men when it comes to how they interact with women, how they view women, their views on equity, feminism, all those things, being an ally and actually being good men. I think the education of men, like for instance, you have laws being passed where women are being imprisoned for having a miscarriage, and it's just like that's not sensible law. That's not sensible policy. That's just like hateful and degrading to see that happen. And I think if men were more educated on women and what actually happens with the woman's body and just like women's experience in this like system of patriarchy, it would be a much better world. So I think the education of boys and men is definitely what would have done that for me.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would say some sort of education where people started to read just like one thing, or like reading 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day or what have you. it would feel like, okay, we're working towards something a bit better here.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So our next espresso shot patrons, would you be able to date someone for information? Now, hear me out. Hear me out. It's not as typical as it sounds or simple as it sounds. In 2013, a young pregnant woman went missing in February of 2013. And her mother was trying to keep her story alive and to try and find her daughter and missing grandchild. It was alleged that the person who she last saw was Dante Lucas, her on again, off again boyfriend. The lady was 21 at the time. Mm-hmm. Well, someone was watching this story or heard wind of the investigation, right? And her name was Lauren Schur, a young single mother who had never met Kelsey Schelling or her family, read about the case and decided she couldn't let it go. On her own initiative, she went and started talking to Dante, the man who is alleged to be the murderer. And she said she did this solely to gain information about the missing woman, Kelsey, the missing 21-year-old young woman, Kelsey. Lo and behold, after playing the long game, even to the point of a proposal, she got this man to confess something to her that was crucial to the case and about his alibi, and therefore he was found guilty and given life imprisonment. Would you be able to, be it for a stranger or family member, Celeste, do something like this, play the long game with somebody else who is potentially dangerous to you, deadly even, and get information?
Oh, okay. Naturally, I'm very risk adverse, so I want to say no. But if it involved a close friend and a family or a family member, I definitely would take a chance.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think so. Because why not? Like that's crazy. And then I think sometimes when I've listened to like true crime stuff, not that I'm a fan of it, but when I have heard true crime details, you'd be surprised how ineffective authority is or ineffective the police are sometimes.
Well, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, so it makes sense to take things into your own hands. What about you? What are your thoughts on it?
My inner mind, my mental, my thoughts are saying no. But in my hearts of hearts, I'm like, would I try this? I'm gonna land on no for now. But much like you're saying, you'd be surprised how far things go when you find that authorities or whoever is supposed to be helping you is not effective in the matter. Like, I never forgot, I heard about this case, I think it was in Mexico, where they assaulted and murdered a woman's daughter, and she went around like she was the Census Bureau and was able to get all the name and information for the people who murdered her daughter. And I said, that was so deadly for her part, but that's her kid, you know. So if it's somebody close to me, who's to say? Maybe not for a stranger, which is really sad, but maybe if it's somebody near to me, maybe that will change my mind. But as for now, my answer is no. My answer is no. I don't think I'd do something like that.
I get that. That's really high.
I'm sort of a scaredy cat.
It's a really high stakes situation.
It is. It's life or death in that moment. Because if he ever finds out what you're doing, or if he decides to kill again, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That lady is being able to post as a census worker. That's really smart.
Yeah. And for this woman in the Kelsey Schelling case, that's whoa. To be able to do that for a complete stranger, wow. And she says she kept in the back of her mind the entire time, this man could be a murderer. So to live those two lives, in those two spaces, like, to bait him enough to believe that it's a relationship versus to like be of the mind like, this man could murder me at any time. Whoa. Kudos to her. Shout outs to her.
Shout outs to her, sure.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the Shakers and Stirrers segment where we are talking about our controversial topic. So what are we talking about today?
We are talking about cults. Is this group just simply exerting their culture, or is it a cult? All right. So first and foremost, what is a cult? Today we're going to lead with Amy Maureen definition that comes straight from Mark Vincente, What the Fuck is on My Mind podcast. He shared this with us as I watched, and I thought this was a very concise definition for now, because there's so many out there and there's so much more that could be added to it, taken away, if you will. So this is what we're working with today. A cult is an organized group whose purpose is to dominate cult members through psychological manipulation and pressure strategies. Cults are usually headed by a powerful leader who isolates members from the rest of society. And we're going to do a deep dive into this today. We're going to look at Dr. Hassan's BITE model. I hope I'm saying his name correctly, because when he did the Trevor Noah interview, he said his name was pronounced, I think it's Hassan and not Hassan. So forgive me for that. We'll have it in the show notes so that you can watch. But once again, a cult is an organized group whose purpose is to dominate cult members through psychological manipulation and pressure strategies. Cults are usually headed by a powerful leader who isolates members from the rest of society. So bear that in mind as we move along and we start talking about cults. One of the models we're going to look at today is by Dr. Hassan, a leading psychologist who was once a cult member himself. He was a part of the Moonies cult, and he came up with this model, and it's called the influence of continuum, along with the BITE model. Okay, so the BITE model is B for behavioral control, I for information control, T for thought control, and E for emotional control. And this is how the cult kind of operates generally. These are some of the things that you have to be mindful of when you think of a cult. And this is like the main tenets of what a cult does and how it gets its members to do the things that they do. Now, the influence continuum is basically like a sliding scale of how the cult, be it the individuals, the leaders, or as an organization, operates. So for instance, we won't go over all of it here because it's going to be hard to relay this without like a PowerPoint or something, but you'll be able to like look up our show notes and be able to like get this yourself. And so, for instance, the continuum, when it's constructive and healthy for individuals to be in a group, is when they allow you to be your authentic self, shower you with unconditional love, and there's compassion, creativity, and humor. You're allowed to express your conscience, free will, and critical thinking. Versus on the other end of that for an individual, it's very destructive and unhealthy. They can give you a false cult identity, which is asserted upon you. There's conditional love. There's hate, there's doctrine, there's fear, and there's dependency and obedience. So you're starting to get the idea. For the leaders, when it's a healthy leader and it's constructive, they're psychologically healthy, knows their own limits, empowers individuals, and so on and so forth, show accountability. But when it's a destructive, unhealthy leader, it's narcissistic, psychopathic, power hungry, secretive and deceptive, claims absolute authority, very elitist and grandiose. So hopefully that's helping you grasp it. And then finally, for organizations using this BITE model as like a way to express these things, if it's constructive and healthy, there will be no BITE model, right? They wouldn't be trying to control you behaviorally, intellectually, anything of the sort. So for an organization and relationships, egalitarianism, there's checks and balances, there's informed consent, which is very important. There's individuality and diversity, means create an end, encourages growth, and you're free to leave. Versus when it's destructive, unhealthy, and more likely to be a cult is when there's elitism, authoritarian structure, deceptive, manipulative, sort of like the BITE model, clones people, meaning they have people who act the same way, behave the same way, think the same way, hence the BITE model. Ends justify means, preserves their own power, and no legitimate reasons to leave. So you're basically held captive, whether or not you fully realize it, because informed consent is not given. And they're using the BITE model in that sense. So one of the ways we're going to go through this today is first, I'm going to talk about the BITE model a little bit more in depth, give you some of the parts of it. Then we're going to go over a cult called NXIVM. And then when we talk about NXIVM, we're going to talk about it from two members' point of view. And then we're going to go into Celeste's portion, which is going to talk about other groups that could be cult. And we're going to use some of the what am I looking for, Celeste? Some of the elements that we go over today, such as the BITE model and such, to establish are they cults or not.
Sounds good.
All right. So first one, behavioral control. Like I said, because you can get this in our show notes. We won't be going over everything, especially because that would be so long-winded as well. So I'm just going to give you some of the the pieces of each control mechanism in the BITE model to be used with the authoritarian influence continuum as well that I just talked about. And so some of the things to be mindful of when it comes to behavioral control. 1, they regulate individuals' physical reality, okay? 2, they dictate where and how with whom the member lives and associates or isolates. So you see that with like groups like the KKK, like you can only be around white people. You can't be around BIPOC individuals and things along those lines. When and how and with whom the member has sex, control types of clothing and hairstyles, punish disobedience by beating, torture, or burning, cutting, raping, or tattooing, or even branding, threaten harm to family and friends, separation of families, imprisonment, even murder, permission required for major decisions, rewards and punishments used to modify behaviors, both positive and negative. So that's behavior control. Information control. There's deception, deliberately withholding information, distorting information to make it more acceptable, systemically lie to the cult members. Another one is compartmentalize information into outsider versus insider doctrines. So ensure the information is not freely accessible, control information at different levels and missions within group, allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. So information and creative thinking does not flow both ways, which is what we talked about when we talked about like thought control and those things, right? And then there's another one for information control, which is very crucial to a lot of cults. It's called an ethical use of confession. Information about sins to use to disrupt or dissolve identity boundaries, withholding forgiveness or absolution, manipulation of memory, possible false memories. And so we will see this with NXIVM when they ask the women who were being assaulted to confess, and they basically it's blackmailing. When they say confession, it's blackmailing because you're giving them all the dirt on you. Sometimes it's false confessions as well because they're so tired, so sleep deprived, etc. So controlled by that time. So when it comes to confession, you're basically giving them information to blackmail you. Sometimes it's false information, but they're following so closely to the doctrine and the leader that they don't realize what they're doing is how it's been explained from what I've watched and read. Okay, the last two in the BITE model. Thought control. Require members to internalize the group's doctrine as truth. So adopting the group's map of reality as reality. Instill black and white thinking. Decide between good versus evil and organize people into us versus them. Therefore, insiders versus outsiders. Changes person's name and identity. Use of load language and cliches which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into platitudinous buzzwords. Okay, so they say this is like loaded language or like tech, as some people call it. So for instance, in NXIVM, they had this thing where it was like feel, think, feel, felt, taught. Like, oh, I think this about the situation. I felt this about the situation. But don't you think that now that you're in the situation, you want to do X, Y, and Z to be better in life? Because NXIVM was advertised at first as like a self-help organization. But they reverse the language onto you. Memories are manipulated and false memories are created. Rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, constructive criticism. So that's just a few of thought control, instilling new map of reality. So labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful. So that's thought control. And then the final one in the BITE model is emotional control. Manipulate and narrow the range of feelings. Some emotions and or needs are deemed as evil, wrong, or selfish. So for instance, with NXIVM, if you start questioning the leader, then you're considered like I forgot the word that they use, but basically you have issues that you need to work through. So it's not the leader ever, or it's not the doctrine ever, it's always the person that's the problem. So that's how they do emotional control. So the minute you start to question, they're like, oh, you have distrust issues, you have doubts, you have these problems, this is on you. There's nothing wrong with the leader or the doctrine. So that's something to be mindful of when it comes to emotional control. Make the person feel that the problem are always their own fault, never the leader's or the group's fault, just like I mentioned. Promote feelings of guilt or unworthiness, such as identity guilt. You're not living up to your potential. Your family is deficient. Your past is suspect. Your affiliations are unwise. Your thoughts, feelings, and actions are irrelevant or selfish. Social guilt, historical guilt. So all these things, and ritualistic and sometimes public confessions of sins. And then the number 8 is phobia indoctrination, inculcating irrational fears about leaving the group or questioning the leader's authority. So then you'll have no happiness or fulfillment if you're not with the group. They're shunning for those who left the group and being rejected. And never a legitimate reason to leave. Those who leave are weak, undisciplined, unspiritual, etc. Threats of harm to ex-member and family. So that's emotional control. Now that was a lot, and I understand that, but I just wanted to give you all a basis of what we're working with today. So that was the BITE model, right? Behavior, information control, thought control, emotional control. And like I said, that works with the continuum of influence, where you see the healthy and unhealthy forms of individual leadership and organization.
Reminds me, there are like pieces of the BITE model that I feel like we've kind of lived through our experience. If you maybe you've been a part of like a friend group or something that like a friend group or what have you, any kind of group where you were like, oh, I don't know about this or what have you, or you expressed some kind of dissent with something, and then all of a sudden it seemed like you were the bad person, that you were attacked, or for just kind of thinking differently or just kind of questioning things, right?
Yes.
Like,
and that is so, I'm so glad that you point that out, because the influence of continuum talks about organizations and relationships as well, especially particularly like abusive or unhealthy relationships. So you are so right on the nose with that. Continue.
It's really interesting because it's that there's an entire model that's talking about these kind of social structures, in and out, just living everyday life. You're in and out of these social experiences where you're like, well, that's really strange, or that's really messed up, or I don't know about that, or what have you. And you find that there's an entire social structure around this. I never really thought about if there was something like that. Like there would it's interesting that there's an entire structure around understanding these really complex social dynamics that we actively live through, or they actively see, even online, especially online.
Yeah, and when I was doing my research, they talked about that there are these new avenues now that cults are taking, and they're basically data mining people before they even get to you. So by the time they get to you, they know so much about you that they can reflect who you are and make it seem like they have those values that you have as well. For instance, one of the former cult members that I looked up when I was watching Cult of Consciousness and his podcast, Mark Vincente, he talks about this being a former NXIVM member. And he was saying how before he got there, he found out later on down the line that they basically data mined him. And so they watched his documentary, they researched him essentially. And so by the time he walked in the room for them to recruit him, he didn't know what hit him, because they presented it as like a way to help the world, which is something that he wanted to do through media. And so he was like, he was sold something so like close to his values that he didn't realize just how disrupted it was until years later. He had I don't want to say drank the Kool-Aid, now that I've learned where that comes from.
Yeah.
Or the flavor aid rather, but he definitely sipped on something really strong and didn't fully realize it until it was like almost too late.
Gotta find another metaphor or euphemism. I don't know what
like another thing.
Yeah, something that's a little more.
Sip the Pepsi. What's or Coca-Cola, since everybody likes.
I gotta make one up. I gotta think of another one, because
yes, sip the water. Everybody drinks water for the most part. The fruit juice. I don't know.
Strange water. That strange water over there.
Yes. Everybody sip the strange water. There you go. So the information that I just shared with you comes from Dr. Stephen Hassan, a leading psychologist in cult behavior, cult research, and also cult interventionism. One of the documentaries or interviews that I watched of him, he had at the time done over 500 cult interventions, and he himself had belonged to a cult. And he received an intervention, ended up leaving the cult, but was curious, like, how did this happen? Because he said He was not a joiner. He led a regular, normal life, right? Good family, quote unquote. Biked across the U.S. at 16. And this is important. He hated Nixon before the cult, right? And this is going to come back later on. Please remind me if I don't mention it, why to mention it.
Okay.
And then he said, in all his years of experience, he has, and this stuck with me, and it's dug deep into my maw now. He said, of all the interventions he's done from his experience as someone who was like strong-willed, etc., he said there's no background, be it racial, economic, social, political, anything like that, that determines whether or not you'll be accosted by a cult or cult member or be absorbed into a cult, authoritarian cult, because it's based on situational vulnerability. He said the way they got him was he was at school. He said, I never thought I'd be a cult member. Like, that just wasn't my thing. I just was a strong-willed guy. I biked across the U.S. at 16. I did all these things. I was at college. I was doing what I wanted to do. I was like writing. I was doing all this. You know, he was doing everything that he was on his path. And he said how they got him was he had just broken up with a girlfriend. And these 2 or 3 women approached him. 3 women, I think, approached him on the college campus, of all places. And he said they were so nice, they were flirty, and they were doing what we now know to be love bombing, which is a technique that cults use as well. Wow. And he said they were so nice to him. It looked like it was going to lead to sex. You know, young man, they did all the things that preyed on his desires at the moment, basically. And so he had just gotten out of a relationship, so he was feeling lonely. He was feeling vulnerable. And he said they invited him somewhere, but he used to work on the weekend. And he was like, oh, can't make it. And then eventually he got relieved of that weekend shift. And he went. And when he went, it took days before they brought him back. He had to threaten violence. And he said this was a tactic because they isolate you, right? Like what we were talking about, they isolate you. And when they isolate you, they start to indoctrinate you slowly, little by little. And how they did that, one of the ways they did that was like with the language control, with the thought control, how they flipped things back onto him. So they were like, oh, we're a Christian group. And he's like, what? I'm Jewish. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And they basically said to him, like, are you closed-minded about Christianity? And they kept telling him, we'll take you in the morning. We'll take you back in the morning. We'll take you back in the morning. We'll take you back in the morning. They were sleep depriving them, taking protein out of their diet, things like that, all the things that kind of mess with your mind. Wow. And so little by little, he was getting indoctrinated into it. And he said it became like they stall taking you back to wherever you need to go. Then they like kind of like program you. And then you fall into this dissociative order to assimilate. And then you start to like realize that you now have become a part of this group without realizing you're part of this group. The way he described it was much better than I'm explaining it, y'all. But once again, we'll have our show notes and you can like really look into these documentaries. But it was very intriguing the way he broke it down and all the things that they did. So I say that to say, understand that we all say, oh, we can never be a part of this or we'll never get caught up in that. And they always say never. And that is very true because like he said, and like other cult members that I watched said, it's never about who you are. It's the vulnerability, the situational vulnerability. Are you going through something? Would you trust someone if they said, hey, you're hurting, you just experienced a grief or a loss, I can take you to somebody who would make you feel better. And in that moment of desperation and vulnerability, you take that advice and you go with that person, and before you know it, you're in a cult.
Wow. Yeah, that really made me think. That really makes me think. Like nobody's above this happening to them, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Is there like a time in your, like reading that and learning that, is there a time in your life where you felt like you saw that in action, whether it was you or like a friend or someone, what have you, like someone who was specifically vulnerable, maybe they had like a really, not to overuse the word traumatic, or really like damaging experience, to where they were kind of pulled into a cult or a cult-like group?
I've never seen it up close, thankfully. At least none that I can recognize now.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
It was interesting. This is when I lived in Vermont, and we lived in Vermont. We were in grad
Mm-hmm.
school. This was when I worked at a co-op, and I was talking to this girl that worked in this department, and she was about to like leave working at the co-op after some time. She was like relatively young. She had to be in her like I want to say late teens, maybe early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
She was talking about how she was going to join a group. Talking with this group, she's like, "Oh yeah, they don't allow cell phones, and it really is just about." She said it was about like wellness and grounding or whatever, like just kind of being removed, right? Being removed from like the rest of the world. And at the time, it just sounded very like strange. And I'm like, okay. At the time, I was relatively still new to Vermont. It was like 2 years in, and it was a very different culture in southern Vermont, as you can imagine. Very different culture. So I was just like, okay, that sounds weird, but whatever. But eventually she had ended up leaving the co-op to join this group where she, I guess, didn't have access to her cell phone, and I don't know. It was all the best to her. I hope that she's doing well today. But yeah, I've seen it in action.
Wow. And that's what they're talking about. First, it starts off as community and belonging. She found something that she thought possibly, and hopefully she's okay. Hopefully it wasn't a cult, but it does give that feel, doesn't it? And so it's community and belonging, according to Sarah Edmondson, who was a member of NXIVM, who did a TED Talk. And so it's community and belonging. Then it's gradual isolation, right? No cell phones, nothing from the outside world. Then it becomes a narrowing worldview, because you're only getting their information. You're thinking the way they want you to think, going back to the BITE model, right? Then it's coded language. Mm-hmm. Then it's top of the drifting iceberg. And then all of a sudden there's a shift, and then you start seeing the darkness, the dark sides of it. But by then you've bought in so much that some people don't speak out against it.
So do you think SIT was a cult?
No. No, it didn't do any of those things, in my opinion. Okay. If anything, it was an expanded worldview. But I also didn't interact with a lot of people too much, so I don't know if I missed something,
Okay, you lived off campus.
I lived off campus, yeah. So I don't know. Did you think it was a cult?
as you were talking about like the different aspects of like so it felt like it, even though it felt like it.
Oh wow. Okay. What part of it stood out to you when I was talking?
Oh gosh, like the specific language, and you're kind of removed from the outer world, or there's like this insular part of it. And SIT, just to we're just talking about graduate school days. There was like an insular world that felt very much like a cult, almost like a we are the world kind of mentality, which quickly started to fracture as time went on. But it's interesting because there's a lot of like, and I think this is more so relative to our larger conversation today, that there's like a lot of cult adjacent things that don't necessarily fit neatly into the BITE model, but they feel very much adjacent just because of how are factioned or fractured rather in our society, and how we it's almost as if it's just very difficult to have any kind of like social cohesion, because everyone just has their own kind of well of information that they live
in. Like microcosms of the world.
Yes, yeah, especially now.
So she said, Sarah Edmondson, the former NXIVM cult member, talks about this idea of like there's a shift, right? After the community and the belonging happens, and the narrowing worldview and the coded language and all that stuff, and you're just at the top of this drifting iceberg, drifting further away from society and everybody else. And then there's a shift. And in her case, the shift was like having to make a bounded choice, but also being blackmailed and branded by Keith Raniere, who is the leader of NXIVM. So let me backtrack. Nexium, one second. It's spelled so weirdly too. So this is being pulled. Nexium was a multi-level marketing company in Cole, founded by Keith Raniere in 1998, and was presented as like a self-help type of meet your potential type of organization, right? We'll help you, we'll coach you up, you'll make these sales like a pyramid scheme almost, but it's called multi-level marketing. You bring somebody else in or a couple of members in, the more you bring in, the higher up you get, the more money you make and things like that. But we always know like some groups like that, they'll show you like the people who are doing the best, and then people who aren't doing so well are in the background kind of suffering and struggling type of thing. And so that's how it kind of worked for Sarah Edmondson. She was one of the ones that they put out in the front, face forward type of thing. But she was also going through some stuff herself in the group. Keith Raniere is currently serving basically a life sentence, and he's thought to be one of the worst cult leaders in the history of cult leaders. That's how bad he was. So there was a shift, and he started branding women, and it was looked at as like elements, but it was actually his initials turned a certain way that was being branded right next to their like private area. And there was blackmailing, forced labor, sex trafficking, and child pornography. And she was one of the whistleblowers, along with Mark Vicente, who I spoke about earlier, and his wife, and a few others. And once they blew the whistle, it was a whirlwind of arrests and investigation. And Keith Raniere, who was a former leader, was one of the people who were arrested as like the main inciter in these in this shift, in the blackmail and the forced labor and the sex trafficking. But what I found interesting in all of this, and aside from what like took place, was she talks about something called bounded choice. And if you remember when I talked about the influence continuum, I talked about like it has to be informed consent. And she talked about bounded choice being essentially coercion. And so like when you come to a cult and they start to inundate you with their doctrine and their mindset and their thought control, their behavioral control, etc., you can no longer, it's deemed that you can no longer make a fully informed consent. So it's like a bounded choice. Like you're like brainwashed by this group, and that's how you make the choice. And interesting enough, one of the literature that Keith gave his group is literature that's used. He put it right in their face. And once again, they were so far gone, unfortunately, that they just didn't see it. Let me see if I can find it. It is called Thought Reform in the Psychology of Totalism, a study of brainwashing in China by Richie Lifton, who's a psychologist. And he talks about the us versus them, the control, the sacred science that the doctrine espouses, loaded language that we talked about, fake news, like we see with MAGA, demand for purity increases, whatever the purity looks like for them, cult of confession, shamefulness, insufficient people, everybody's insufficient, aside from the doctrine and the leader, use things against you, spy on each other. So all these things and more came from the book. And these were the things that Raniere was doing with his group. But he gave some of them this book to read. And they're like, no, he would never do this, because they were so sold on this, like, on this man and who he was. And I think people do that. Sometimes we get so caught up in leaders. Like I see this in churches. I never forgot, a friend of mine invited me to a church like it was like over 2 decades ago. Like, no. Yeah, almost 2 decades now. This was like 2013. No. So like 1 decade. What am I saying? I'm making myself older than I am. Sorry, y'all. I'm not the best mathematician in the room. But nonetheless, years ago, she took me to a church, and I was like, okay, let's see what this is about. I'm not religious, but let's see what this is about. And it was the first time I've ever, I think, heard a pastor be so human. And he said, people look at me and come to me like I'm God himself. I am but a mouthpiece of Jesus. But because we're so used to a lot of pastors doing that, and calling and trying to present themselves as prophets and things like that, right? That we don't separate them from God. We start to merge them or meld them with God. And I thought that was so interesting that for a young pastor that he caught that and was like saying that out loud. And there was a tension in the church when he said it. And I couldn't pinpoint what it was, but there was a tension in the church when he said it. Short of the long, I bring that up to say that there are a lot of leaders whose enthusiasm and charisma people get caught up in it to the point where they feel like these leaders can do no wrong, no harm, and they're messiahs and gods themselves. And some of the cults that I researched, like Yahweh Ben Yahweh and a few others, really touch on that type of like behavior where the cult leader becomes like a messiah or start to call themselves like names, like in Keith Raniere's case, I think he called himself avant-garde or something like that. But it was, and of course, it's something that becomes unattainable to the other members of the cult. So only he can like have this position and this like reach and this like connection to the Messiah and the prophet, or is the Messiah themselves. So it was very interesting to read about that shift and see how crazy that becomes when people buy into that. So going back to Sarah Edmondson, she has been, at the time of this TED Talk, she was 6 years free of the cult. But she talked about some cult literacy lessons she learned so not to be preyed upon. She said, cults are everywhere, and it might not be what you expect that appeals to your total normal humanity and looks normal. For instance, a yoga class with nice people, an incredible opportunity like Nexium to sell a product, sisters who welcome you to the family, good versus malignant endgame, right? And so like, it looks like a good organization. It plays upon your emotions to want to have a better world, because Nexium presented itself like something that would have a better world once they help people, but it was far from that. 2, it preys on your humanity with love bombing to reel you in, like sex traffickers, designed to make you feel like you're part of something, dogma and doctrine. Right way is their way, and it's the only way. Us versus them comes real fast. Courses of indoctrination binds you to the group through these courses and through all this love bombing and all these things. And you're like a frog in cold water, that where the water gradually heats up. I don't know if you've ever heard that metaphor.
Yes, like boiling a frog. It just takes putting up the heat a little by little by little.
Versus putting it in the hot water because it'll jump out right away. And this is what a lot of people experience that I watched in the cult. I even watched this one called the Orgasm Taste Cult, the One Taste Cult. And the guy experienced something like that. Like, it was a gradual heat up. And so by the time the water was hot, he was too soaked and too far in to even realize what was happening until something happened to shift it for him. There's love versus love bombing. So going back to the influence model, there's something that's healthy and there's something that's not. Any group can become culty, not immune to cultic indoctrination. You feel like you can't say no. You start questioning your worth, your rational versus skeptical mind. So that dissociation that Asan talks about, dissociative disorder that he talks about, where your rational mind and the cultic indoctrination kind of fight with each other until you, in a way, like go to sleep with your rational mind, because you feel like, oh, that's not the cult's way, that's not the cult's doctrine, that's not what the language that the cult uses, things like that, without realizing it's a cult. They always have an assumption of your neediness. They have a way to heal you, though they're the ones creating the problem. They're expensive in the fact that they're exploitative and expensive in both time and money. There's loaded language. Check out the lawsuit and bad press on any group before you join. Always have definitive answers from the leaders. No flowery language, no loaded language. And when you're in a good group, questions are welcomed. You can exit drama-free and healthy amount of commitment. So those are some of the things that she talked about, just to show you guys what a cult embodies for the most part. So the next step of what we're going to do, and the Nixon thing. Why that was important was because before Dr. Hassan had joined this cult at the time as a young man, he was not pro-Nixon. And by the time he had joined the cult, he was going on hunger strikes. What do you call that? Fasting? He was fasting because God told the cult leader of the Moonies that Nixon needed to win. And therefore, they were fasting so they could support Nixon's win. That's how deep in he became.
Wow.
Yeah. We are gonna, now that we've given you the basic, the foundational information of what makes a cult, how groups can become a cult, the documents that they use to be cults, the signs, the bite model, the influence of continuum, all of that now is going to be applied to Celeste's portion, where we try to go through these groups and determine, in our own opinion, are they a cult? And please, in the chat, tell us if you think these groups are a cult or if we're wrong.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to start off with fan bases, cult or not.
What he gave, what Mark Vicente gave us. Okay. Organized group, psychological manipulation and pressure strategies. Okay. They isolate members from society. They have a pathology. Here we go. That is that is covert, and the leader is a supreme being. Is there anything like that in this cult, in this group?
So you're talking relative to
the fan base.
Okay, so fan bases. Okay, we'll just talk about fan bases in general, right?
And then I'm gonna give you the things, the cult things, and you can say if they had that kind of characteristics. Okay, so pathology. That is covert, and a leader that is a supreme being. Do they have that kind of and they also have deep shame for their followers if you leave? Do they do any of those things?
So fan bases generally, I think they tend to deify celebrities or whoever they're fans of.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the shaming, people that are, okay. I'm just referring to this article from this, it's called Latinitas. But anyway, it was an article that this girl had written that she was a very committed 21 Pilots fan. Like, when she said committed, she like spent somewhere over at least $5,000 in just going to their shows, their merchandise, and what have you. Like, really committed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about how fans can turn really nasty when they invest a certain amount of money. They invest their time and energy into like knowing everything they can about a particular celebrity, what have you. So she was talking about her specific experience relative to becoming a 21 Pilots fan, and then someone I don't recall what it is. I'll have to put it in the show notes. But anyway, someone adjacent to them, or someone, I think a group member, getting bullied because of some celebrity drama or something that happened where they had to be hospitalized. So going back to your point, the only reason I mentioned that is because I'm going back to your point relative to how fan bases can act, right? Or how it seems like I guess I'm trying to correlate the behavior with what you were presented relative to the bite model.
Okay. They regulate individuals' physical reality, dictate where, how, and with whom the member lives, associates with, controls type of clothing and hairstyle, regulate diet, manipulation, deprivation of sleep. Is it information control, deception, deliberately withholding information, compartmentalize information, outsider versus insider doctrine, so like a us versus them?
No, so I guess fan bases don't coincide with that definition.
How about the influence continuum for individuals, authentic self versus false cult identity, conditional love, hate, doctrine, or any of the leaders of the fan base, narcissistic, psychopathic, elitists?
When you're talking about online behavior, I guess that can be the case because it's starting to feel this false sense of power. I don't even know if it's a false sense of power, like the sense of power because you're a moderator, or even like a specific fan group where you're part of whatever Beyonce's fan the Beehive fan group, whatever, that you've been like managing for how many years or whatever. It's definitely like there's definitely like a false sense of power, or a sense of power that comes with that.
So there's kind of like an egotistical nature to it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it might not be a cult based on these definitions, but it is kind of damaging nonetheless.
Okay. Right. So as far as fan bases, I suppose, yeah, there's like maybe parts of it that feel like a cult but aren't necessarily a cult. Okay. What about fraternities and sororities?
Yeah, I wondered about that, but when I looked it up, it was saying that because they create more community and belonging and you can leave, it's not, and it doesn't like isolate you because it's like community organization, but the hazing might make it that part of it behaviorally like a little bit close to it, but it's not, it didn't qualify as a cult.
Okay. Okay. MAGA.
What do you think? What do you think?
I mean,
let's go through it. Do you want to go through it again?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Pathology. They have this belief that their leader is a supreme being.
It's funny. I want to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll say yes. Yes.
I'll say yes too. Cult leaders activate deep shame in their followers. Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Showered with praise, sense of love and belonging, community, and designed vibe of happiness for new recruits until they bully in until the bullying or conversion starts.
I think a lot of what brings MAGA people together, or it seems like what brings MAGA people together, is just this maybe a sense of like specifically economic distress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's like, well, I did all the right things. I'm a white dude. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What I was supposed to do, and I'm still not where I want to be, or I see other people doing better than me that should not be doing better than me. It's like this entitlement, this very strange entitlement that I feel like, at least from what I've seen and read in articles, that I feel like is prevalent relative to what brings them together. So I don't know if they're necessarily brought together by anything happy. I think it's out of hatred or out of like distress. But what are your thoughts on it?
I think their hatred makes them happy, if that makes sense. Being able to see the world that they want. Like when you ask me that question, oh, the world's a better place. In their mind, I think, based on what I've seen on interviews and stuff, they think the world is becoming a better place because people are being exterminated, killed, prosecuted, persecuted that don't look like them. So I think their hatred makes them happy. So in that sense, I feel like yes. But then I feel like the bullying comes in the other part when they start to slowly realize that, well, like some of them do, that they're not economically standing on the same grounds as the people they vote for. The other one is obedience, absolute obedience. In order for A to exist, you must do B. So followers surrender over to the belief. They don't really question it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's definitely that's definitely, even after he said like only smart people hate me or something like that, or smart people don't like me. He said that to them and they still were like, okay, we'll follow you. He's a pedophile, and they're like, okay, we'll follow you. Mm-hmm. Infantilization. Followers feel like children and leaders as all wise, all powerful, and parental figures seen in corporations and religion need to individuate to get out of cult, but they don't. I think, yeah. Because they follow so like mindlessly. Mm-hmm. That's almost like children who don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which goes back to the obedience.
Or it's like they it's like they give up their critical thinking skills if they it's like they give up their critical thinking skills because it's assumed that this person knows more. And I'm pretty much like repeating what you had said, but even like this person and then his group of cronies or yes men or what have you.
Yes,
they're the best people for the job, or even though these are definitely clearly very, very, very inexperienced, or people who should not be in a position of power, right?
Really. Okay. The other one is isolation. Cultic system is designed to break down person and isolate them from their friends and family because they are not supportive of the lifestyle and are blocking them from their mission as MAGAs. I can see that because I've heard stories online of people who say, like, I don't talk to that specific uncle or aunt anymore because they just won't listen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or even living online. And we're all online pretty much. It's really difficult to find someone who doesn't have some kind of like, I don't know, like a third space. Like this doesn't have a third space that exists online. Right? Everything is online. So I think it's very easy to just get in your own little echo chamber. So especially if you're feeling like, with like groups of color, groups that are different from you, they have some kind of edge ahead of you. That you feel like I guess you fold into yourself. It seems like.
Yeah. No, I feel that it does definitely become an echo chamber. It definitely becomes an echo chamber. Yeah. And it's to the point where it's costing them relationships because they feel like, oh no, I have it right, you don't.
Yes.
All right, next up, the mission. Life and death requires devotion. Common denominator is that they are idealists, hard to abandon mission, trapped in vision of goodness. So to outsiders, don't you think it's important to make the world a better place? So for them, the mission is like whatever, I guess, Trump or whoever says, like the world that they're trying to create. I feel like they do this. Because you have agents who are killing people who there's an uptick from what I'm seeing in white supremacy thing, people being hung, all that. So there are definitely people who are dedicated to the mission of like wiping the world of everything non-white.
Yeah.
Doctrine over person. Ideology is bigger than a person. Mission is primary. You're a small cog in the wheel, and your humanity is a problem which promotes hate of self and completely unresolvable. I don't know if they is that hate of self that they promote, but I definitely feel like they put the ideology of what they're doing above everybody else. Because they kind of, especially like with all of the accusations against Trump, the fact that they still believe everything that he says. So I feel like they do put the doctrine over themselves and over their values, if they had any other values, because they're basically following a well-known pedophile.
Yeah. I mean, the next one I just had was influencers after that. I mean, I had like evangelical Christians, Baptist Christians, but yeah, it's pretty much all the same, I feel like.
And so you guys know the list that I was using is from Mark Vicente's What the Fuck Was on My Mind, and it's like What is a Cult is the episode, and or WTF is on my mind is how it's written, but there's more to it, but we're just using like some of them just to like give a general sense of these groups. That's all. So it was like 20. Let me make sure I have the number correct. For one moment, everyone. 25 like pieces to it, and we only went over like 7 or 8. But just to give you an idea of how extensive the list is when you're establishing what is a cult, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the next one you had, Celeste?
The next few that I had was evangelical Christians, Baptist Christians, and then influencers.
Okay, go for it.
I will just say influencers.
Why did you pick influencers for this little cult test?
So influencers are pretty much salespeople for brands. They're people that already have an established relationship with a following. They've gathered a large following of people, follow them for lifestyle stuff. Music, it could be anything relative to something that they're just interested in, right? Brands find those people if they have a big enough following, and they'll sell things through that person. It's almost like a trusted messenger to be able to carry out like selling your brand or selling whatever it's going.
Okay.
I picked influencers because they do have a following. It does seem like if there's some kind of, depending on what influencer it is, that there is some kind of depending on who you talk to, that there's like a deification, for lack of a better term, of certain influencers. So yeah, it's just interesting, and maybe specifically relative to like the makeup influencers that I've seen, or some of the beauty influencers. I think a lot of people are sometimes moved by just things that they find appealing, like physically appealing or what have you, or they're just amazed at their talent, or their charisma, what have you. That it just seems like they're willing to abdicate a lot of critical thinking. So yeah.
All right. So you're looking at people who follow influencers as a potential cult. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it sounds silly now because there's an entire structure around cults that a lot of this just doesn't adhere to. But yeah.
Hey, that's what we're doing. We're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, true.
We're trying to figure it out. How do you feel about the KKK? To cult or not to cult?
I'd say a cult.
Okay. And what, based on what we've read so far, makes you think? Sorry, I'm just going through my note. That makes you think they're a cult, in your opinion?
I mean, there's not like a specific authoritarian leader. No, outside of the grand, I think they're called like the Grand Master Wizard of the KKK.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it seems like they feel like they're doing something that to make the world a better place, whether it's to like exterminate groups that are like different from themselves and promote the socioeconomic and political wellness of like white people in particular, whatever the heck that means.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it seems like people that come to the Ku Klux Klan in particular feel like are usually people that just feel ostracized by society, like they're in a specifically vulnerable state. They don't exist. Maybe they feel like maybe they have an ex-girlfriend or something who's now dating a brown guy or something, or they have this like inferiority complex. I feel like there's like this weird inferiority complex with men when it comes to penises, but that's maybe that's another podcast. I think there's like this fear of like black dick or something. That's kind of going a little too. I'm starting to go a little bit into a different territory there, but yeah. Anyway, there's like several things that can play into why it feels like the KKK is a cult.
Okay. I had watched this documentary and I took some notes. It's called Ku Klux Klan, Symbols, Violence, and Ideology. Mm-hmm. It was on YouTube from Slice History, and this will be in our thing. And where was I going with this?
I think you might have been. It seemed like you were trying to kind of certify that if they were not a cult, depending on the characteristics of some of the elements that have to fall into place from the previous models.
Yeah, thank you. And based on what I saw or heard on this and other research I did on the KKK, they are very much following the BITE model, and they're very much following the influence continuum of authoritarian control that should be used with the BITE model, which we talked about earlier in the thing. But there's like is a schism the word I'm looking for, where there's this idea that people now don't know how strong the KKK is, because it had like 3 or 4 different peaks or spikes. But I venture to say when they marched on Capitol Hill July 4th weekend, clearly there's some organization going on, given that was a different group separate from the KKK. But like, is it they're a cult, but are they also just like a terrorist organization? Are terrorist organizations cults? Because they do indoctrinate people, they do isolate you, there is behavioral control and extremism, there's emotional control and thought control when you join some of those groups. So it made me wonder, are all terrorist groups like a form of a cult? But that's going to take a deep dive, people.
Yeah.
And please put in the chat, let us know what you think about that. Or are terrorist groups a cult? And go through some of our information that we gave and shared with you guys, and let us know what you think about that. Yeah. You know. And so is that our shakers and stirrers section for now? Do you have another one you want to use?
No, I feel like they all kind of meld into each other when I say evangelical and Baptist Christians. And the only reason those are different is because of denominations and their tendency to have like evangelical tends to be more like white Christians, Christians, and Baptist Christians tending to be more black. And yeah, but yeah, I'll just stop right there.
Okay. And there were so many other cults that we looked up, but we just didn't want to like inundate y'all with information. So hopefully this was enough for you to now go into tea time. And what was the tea time, Celeste?
Our tea time. Okay, so this is our section where you can chime into the conversation that we had relative to cults. So our question relative to cults. What was our question? Our question was,
is there an organization you know that you think is a cult or could be a cult, something like that?
Okay, so you already heard a lot about relative to cults and how they work, how they operate, examples of cults as well. Give us your definition of what feels like a cult or what is a cult, or maybe feels cult adjacent relative to the Vite model, or maybe it just feels like something close to the Vite model as well. Let us know what you think. You can connect with us, email us at theochatbar@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at the OC Chat Bar, or we're on rss.com as well. We got the OC Chat Bar. We're on all socials and our YouTube, the OC Chat Bar.
Yeah, like for instance, for my tea time, you can't tell me the manosphere is not a cult. It's an online virtual.
Okay, why do you think that? Why do you think that?
Well, if you think about it, they have a certain doctrine. They're very isolated in their thoughts. The way they behave is controlled or is like mandated. The way they think is also is controlled, right? Because they have to think a certain way, view women a certain way, view men a certain way, the alpha and all this bullshit that they talk about. And then in addition to that, it's like they are very isolated. And then when it comes to the influence continuum, it's not being your authentic self. It's like taking on the identity of whatever this manosphere says is the identity of a man. And so when you see men who step away from it, start assuming they're like taking on their authentic self, talking about like unconditional love, compassion, being more conscious, things along those lines, it's very, to me, very clear that the manosphere, though it takes place mainly online, is in fact a cult. In my opinion. This is my opinion, people. This is my opinion. Agree or disagree in the chat nicely. And let us know what you think.
Yeah, let us know what you think, guys. Thank you for tuning into the OC Chat Bar podcast.
Oh, wait. Oh, and then for Top Shelf Liquor Behavior, thank you guys for all the views you've given us so far. And hopefully we'll keep seeing you guys watching. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you.
We appreciate you for sure.
Okay. Thank you guys for listening. Bye.
Bye.